Good morning. Good morning, all. Welcome to this session on Tales from the Cloud. Here comes Ultraviolet. We really appreciate the panelists and you all being here. I know a lot of you had maybe a late night last night, so thank you for coming. I'm Kate Bulkley. I'm a media commentator and journalist. I'm based in the UK, and I'm basically here to moderate a session about Ultraviolet. If you don't know what Ultraviolet is, you're going to learn a lot about it. If you're not sure you want to become part of Ultraviolet, they're going to try to impress upon you that that's probably a good idea. So you'll learn about that too. We will have time for question and answer, sort of interspersed. I'm going to break kind of halfway, I think, bring in some questions, see where you guys are, and then we'll come back to a little more panel, and then we'll have some more Q&A. We're going to start with a little speech by someone who knows a lot about Ultraviolet as well. But first, I'm going to bring on my panel. Come on, guys. Okay, so this is Mark Teitel, who's just coming out. I'm going to actually introduce, that's great, they're here. Isn't that good? Yeah, come on in. Okay, I'm going to introduce them from the far side first, just so you know who's who. Rodolphe Bouet, he's Executive Vice President, International Distribution and New Business at Studio Canal. He's at the far end there. Stephen Chester, Vice President for Film for streaming media service company Akamai. He's next. Justin Hertz, he's SVP Direct to Consumer and General Manager Advanced Digital Services at Warner Brothers. Next to him, we have Robert Price. He's MD of the UK for 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment. Then we have Dan Saunders. He is Head of Content Services at Samsung Electronics Europe. And last but not least, we have Mark Teitel, who is Executive Director of DECE LLC. How's that for an acronym? That stands for Digital Entertainment Content Ecosystem, which is what Ultraviolet's all about. It's a consortium of Hollywood studios. You're going to hear more about this, but I'll just say Hollywood studios, consumer electronics manufacturers, which is why we have Daniel from Samsung, retailers, network hardware vendors, system integrators, digital rights management people, all kinds of folks. It started out with 12 partners in September 2008. It now has about 75, so it's clearly growing. Mark, why don't you start us off, give us kind of an overview of where we are with Ultraviolet. Mark Teitel.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming this morning. I am going to intentionally try to be pretty brief and fast, but I'd like to probably spend 5-6 minutes or something, both showing a short video and then just hitting some highlight themes about the rationale for Ultraviolet, a little bit about how it works, and suggesting some of the topics that we might want to then cover with kind of panelists. So for starters, and to spend a couple minutes, is a brief concept video that we'd like to run, and then I'll make a few remarks.
At last, the power of the internet and today's digital devices are aligning to bring movie and TV fans total freedom of entertainment. Get ready for Ultraviolet. Brought to you by an alliance of the leading entertainment and technology companies. Ultraviolet will redefine how you collect and watch movies and TV shows. Just as the entertainment and technology industries came together to bring you DVD and Blu-ray, now the Ultraviolet Alliance has united so you can enjoy the best of downloads, discs, and streaming with one simple, powerful system that puts you in charge. Start by downloading an Ultraviolet movie or TV show, or bringing home a Blu-ray disc with the Ultraviolet logo. Then set up your free Ultraviolet account and begin enjoying entertainment your way. Ultraviolet entertainment can be anywhere you are, with copies on up to 12 Ultraviolet devices registered in your account, and the ability to watch via streaming most anywhere you access the internet. So you can share with family, around the house, or on the go. All participating Ultraviolet retailers, streaming services, and devices will work with your Ultraviolet account, so you can shop at your choice of Ultraviolet retailers and be confident that your movies and TV shows will play on any brand of Ultraviolet device, and that they'll be accessible via Ultraviolet streaming services. Choice, confidence, freedom. The way you collect and watch movies and TV shows will never be the same. Ultraviolet. Freedom of entertainment. Coming in 2011.
Great. Well, first of all, for starters, just some people, probably the law of averages would be at least one of you was at CES this past January in Las Vegas, and actually that was the first time we had debuted talking in detail about Ultraviolet, and we show this video. And I'm really pleased to say that last part that said coming in 2011 is actually true, because I think especially as Justin from Warner Brothers will talk about it in a little bit more detail, it's actually coming next week now to the consumer market starting in the US, so that's great. A few words about kind of where this came from and a little bit more about what it is, and then I'll hand it back to you, Kate, and we can get going. You know, the members companies of this alliance that came together did so because of the belief, really, that digital distribution so far just isn't really working very well for consumers or for the industry. There was this kind of promise of everything that the internet and digital devices could do should make it better for actually people to want to enjoy entertainment, particularly for the highest value offering of entertainment, which is ownership. But in truth, so far, it really hasn't been very good for consumers. They have fears that they don't really feel like they own something if they buy it. They could lose it, PCs can crash. Next time you move from one device to the next, there's a lack of confidence that you'll really be able to have that collection come with you in an enduring way. There's also a pretty strong sensitivity to feeling locked in to buying from only one retailer or being able to use entertainment on only one device. And in that context, consumers always have an easy choice, even when they really want to see a movie or TV show that, that we make in the industry, which is that they can rent it, sometimes for pretty cheap. Or they can get it as part of a subscription, or of course they can get it via piracy. So kind of the most important part of the home entertainment business from the standpoint of actually letting the entertainment business run and be funding ownership products have not really worked very well for consumers, and they also haven't worked well for the industry, which is something we're going to talk about. So this group of companies that Kate referred to, some of the biggest Hollywood movie and TV studios, some of the world's largest consumer electronics branded companies, some of the technology companies that really make the internet and digital video work, and then a pretty diverse group of retailers, bricks and mortar, multi-channel operators, over-the-top retailers, all came together to design how Ultraviolet is going to work, and are also part of an organization that actually will be operating a centralized, open, digital rights repository, essentially, for the industry to use. One point I'd like to make is that some aspects of what we're doing here among these companies feels like a standards body. There's some technology standards and some things like that. But in a really important way, this has actually been equally, or in fact, perhaps more about actually a business framework and a legal framework for how companies can work together in what's really a new age here. The idea of a consumer owning content now, or buying content, has ceased to be a one-time event where only a content provider and a retailer were involved, and feels more like an ongoing service now where there perhaps can actually be 3, 4, or multiple parties involved over time. And there's a lot to figure out about the way that's going to work, just like there was a lot to figure out about the way the internet was going to work, for example. So that's what this group of companies and some others that are not on this list are focused on. Okay, let me talk a little bit about what it actually is. The idea fundamentally is that when a consumer buys a movie or TV show, they're not just getting a single digital file, they're not just getting a disc. They're actually getting a set of rights that lets them use all of those things, downloaded files, streaming, and physical media. What we're really trying to do is to bring together the best of two different worlds that don't exist today in the consumer view. One of them is the way that physical media has worked, where actually retailers and devices could be used interchangeably because of standards, DVD, Blu-ray, or in the music business, CD, and others. But together, taking that together with all the things that cloud-based access can bring, of flexibility of how you use it, where ability for multiple people to access content, some of the certainty that comes from being able to back up content in the cloud and some things like that. That's the what of it, basically. Let me move very briefly just through the how to illustrate this a bit more. So literally starting next week in the US, consumers will start to see certain movies and TV shows for sale, movies first, that have the Ultraviolet logo. When they do, whether it's online or following instructions that have come in a disc package, they'll be prompted to either create an Ultraviolet account, which is free, there's no credit card information required, or if they've already created one, they can log in. And then what they're going to be able to do, essentially, is have the equivalent of a digital proof of purchase go into an online personal library that they and up to 5 other members of a family or household account can share. One super important part is that that library is not a destination. We do have a website, uvvu.com, but we've designed this to actually be embedded within the online presence of retailers and service providers. So just the way people see weather information or stock quotes or sports scores, often not from the original source, but in the company that aggregates news and audience together. Similarly, we anticipate and intend for Ultraviolet to actually be experienced where consumers shop for content today, where they go to play content today. Once consumers have an Ultraviolet library with titles in it, they're going to be able to actually enjoy that library in a whole host of ways that they don't today, spanning, as mentioned, downloads and streaming and physical media. The video we just watched talked about what we would call the usage model of a pretty large number of permitted devices to have downloaded copies at any one time, up to 3 simultaneous streams going on, the right to have physical media as well. And so a variety of sources point to the fact that this is going to be a pretty breakthrough value proposition for consumers. Justin for sure can talk some more about this. And this, I'm happy to say also this slide is already outdated. But these are some of the initial titles from Warner Brothers and from Sony Pictures Entertainment that in the US will actually be the very first ones to come with Ultraviolet rights associated with them. Since the time of actually putting this stuff onto this PowerPoint slide, I think there's been a couple of other films that have been announced, and also Warner Brothers recently announced the first TV shows that would come with Ultraviolet, which I think is going to be a big and important opportunity as well. Okay, a couple quick points, and then let me hand it back to you, Kate. Implications, and we might want to talk about these today. More value for money, more excitement, more engagement for consumers. The sell-through proposition has kind of sat still a little bit over the last few years, at least in my view, while rentals and subscriptions have innovated and become more valuable. And Ultraviolet's really about, I think, a reversal of that and actually a regrowth of the value proposition of owning and collecting content. Second is, and this is critical, we have standardized certain things, but more than anything else, I think we've built a business and technical platform that will let people innovate. There's a lot of different business model opportunities that are associated with a new way that consumers can collect and own content. For content providers, obviously, also for retailers, and also for service providers that today don't typically sell content. There's also some really exciting opportunities that I see for home entertainment to enter more of the realm of relationship and one-to-one marketing when consumers are non-anonymous and have the ability, if they opt in, to actually get recommendations and to be part essentially of relationship marketing. There's a lot of exciting opportunities that historically in the world of packaged media have been harder to get to. A couple more things that are actually usually going to be invisible to consumers, but one important part about Ultraviolet is that from the standpoint of retailers or service providers, because of standardization and having multiple companies implementing the same tech specs and accessing the same underlying rights database, we think there's going to be a better suite of make versus buy options for a retailer or for a service provider that wants to use and implement Ultraviolet. You can still do it all yourself, but unlike the way digital's been so far, there's actually going to be a fairly predictable and well understood and standardized set of things that can be done by a growing host of big B2B enablers that have invested capital and have a high degree of expertise in being able to provide that for you instead. And then there's a whole host of ways we think Ultraviolet is going to streamline how you actually go from the standpoint of once making a deal with a content provider if you're a retailer to actually having files and be able to display them to consumers. A lot of time and effort cut out of the actual deal making itself because we've actually standardized certain aspects, and actually a lot of fragmentation cut out of the supply chain where you're literally trafficking digital files. So I think we'll maybe get into some of that today. But with that, let me kind of tee it up and we can take questions as we go when you let us. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. I'm going to ask you to sit down. And I get to stand up, so that's exciting. I think that was a really good overview. That was a really good start. I hope that kind of gave you some idea about what Ultraviolet is if you haven't actually seen it before. Let me just start with the studios. I want to start with Justin, actually, first, from Warner. You know, obviously something that replicates what DVD has done for the studios in terms of bringing money in as DVD starts to decline is something that, you know, you guys are interested in. You know, but will customers trust this? You know, will they trust Ultraviolet? Will it give them, will there be the confidence that they're buying a digital right, this sort of thing that exists in cyberland in a locker somewhere? I mean, how are you going to get that message across? Do you think that that's going to work? In other words, can it substitute DVD?
Well, just to underline a point that I think Mark teed up nicely in his intro, we have done a terrible job in introducing digital products into this ecosystem. And the consumers have voted pretty vociferously against what we've done. So it really comes down to, can we deliver a valuable product, delivering on accessibility, interactivity, the ability to know that the content that you have acquired will be there and accessible through the various touch points and on the different devices that consumers want. I think we're going to start spending a lot of time and a lot of money marketing the value of Ultraviolet, the brand of Ultraviolet. It's not just going to be Warner. It's going to be, everybody sitting up here and many others that aren't represented currently. And it probably, the big challenge for us right now, there's been a tremendous amount of hard work that's been done by all of the companies that make up the DECE. The technical pieces, as Mark kind of said, those are some of the easy things, actually. Business, maybe a little bit more complex. Marketing the value of this clearly to the consumer is the big challenge that we all have to take on. And so we're going to start focusing on that significantly. We're going to start running spots as of next week. But ultimately, it's really not a Warner initiative. We can participate, and we want to participate with all the different partners. It needs to be a group effort. And I think if we have a compelling, easy-to-use consumer proposition, we have clear, consistent messaging around the value.
Let me ask you, just to go back to my original question, do you think it will replace DVD? Will it be the savior for DVD, the DVD line in your P&L?
We think that at the end of the day, there's going to be a mix of products that make up our P&L going forward. Clearly there's been a decline on the physical front, but physical is not going away. And it's not going away all that quickly. We think this is an additive value to physical. It's definitely going to be an additive value to digital purchase as well. So at the end of the day, it's really about, it's about having, the bottom line that supports our ability to create Harry Potter. Right. And we think it's not a single answer. Ultraviolet is not the only answer, but it's an important piece.
Great, thank you. Robert, let me go to you two now, because you're Fox, yeah? Now, you don't have any titles yet for this, but you're moving towards that.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you think you'll have some by the end of the year, or do you think it'll be 2012?
I'm not sure on time. I think by Q1 definitely will have announced things, yes.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about, we've talked a little bit about the content. Justin's talked about, putting the marketing machine in gear. I assume you guys will as well. But it's also about reach across devices. Now, one of the problems with Ultraviolet is it doesn't include our good friends at Apple, right? It doesn't have iTunes. Does that make you nervous that basically you're missing what I think is a pretty key retailer?
I mean, clearly we'd like to have Apple as part of UV, but I don't think it makes us nervous. I think there's plenty of examples of services that run on iOS that are successful that Apple don't own. Netflix have done that very successfully in the US through the app model. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to still be very successful using Apple products. And I'm sure Dan will talk to that later on.
Robert, I agree with you. If I just to put one sentence further on that, for us, it's important to differentiate between iTunes, the content store, and will consumers who own Apple devices be able to actually take advantage of the Ultraviolet collection? And I think to the point that you made on that latter question, which to us is more important because we focus on consumers, we're optimistic that, of course, the answer is yes. Some of the stuff I think that you'll talk about, Justin, in a little bit will actually feature the fact that about a week from today, some consumers will probably be doing just that very thing.
So the idea is that you can stream to a device, but you can't buy from iTunes. Is that the distinction?
Unless iTunes joins this quickly and debuts it in 8 days, then for at least the short run, yes, you're correct. That would be
and we certainly hope they do.
Okay. So the devices will be, I can still get it on my iPad as a streaming, not as a download, but I can't buy it from iTunes because they're not part of the consortium at this point.
That's right.
Okay.
And just from a functional standpoint, while we're going to be rolling out revised or new versions of the Flixster application next week, where you'll be able to stream content from your locker, you will actually be able to download to the Flixster app in the future, certainly before the end of the year. So you can watch on your iPad or iOS device or Android offline or connected.
So Rodolphe, I want to ask you next. I want to bring you in. You're from Studio Canal. Yep. You obviously have a theatrical business. You have paid TV, you do DVD, you do the whole thing. You're not part of Ultraviolet yet. What would convince you? What do they need to do to make you get on board? I mean,
well, first, I would like to say that we are not part of Ultraviolet, but we definitely feel that we need to bring this interoperability and this flexibility and simplicity to the customer, and it's critical for the development of our business to be able to be accessible for any devices. Right now, the main concern we have about Ultraviolet are linked to 2 or 3 points. First one, we are content owner, we are producers, we are distributors, and we feel that we should be totally agnostic about technology. My main focus is to be able to produce the right films and to distribute these films and make the more money I can. And right now, the existing business model are, okay, I'm not fully convinced that it will be so easy to market the ultraviolet concept. And so far, I'm not prepared to invest money to promote a technology or to promote a system. I rather prefer to invest 100% of my cash to promote my films, to get the better potential content, and then deal with the different platforms and different partners to make more money potentially. Second point is we have a real concern about the ability of the Ultraviolet Consortium to make and to settle great relationship with the distributors. I used to lead one of the most important European retailers for entertainment, the snack groups, and one of the critical points for us was at that point, and it's still the case, to retain customers' data and to protect this information, which was critical for us, and we thought that it was part of the patrimony of the company. And so, being in a position to share this data, it's a real question mark.
Okay. Good point. Share data. Yes.
And then the third point is definitely we are facing potential partners, potential distributors, IP providers, which are investing $1 billion in technology, $1 billion to develop their market share, to develop their direct communication with customers. And I'm not sure we will be in a position to compete this level of investment, this level of marketing. When we consider the marketing money, Apple, Facebook, Google invest in marketing and research, and it's not comparable to what we are prepared to invest in this ultraviolet world. So it's mainly the three reasons why we are still waiting. So I mentioned that we were agnostic. But in the meantime, if ultraviolet is successful, if we feel that in the US market ultraviolet succeed in getting the right contact with the retailers, then we will definitely help.
So you're kind of doing the chicken and egg thing. You want to wait and see if it works. Now, who wants to come back and say something?
I'd
Justin.
like to comment on the data piece, because I think it is really interesting, and certainly as partners, retailers, and other service providers think about coming into the ecosystem, that's one of the key areas that they wrestle with. I'll draw an analogy to something that's quite different, but the Facebook platform and the quid pro quo that Facebook and other third parties that are using their APIs get in terms of exchange. Facebook gets a tremendous amount of data whenever a third party integrates Facebook Connect or some of their other APIs into the platform. But on the other hand, the third party gets tremendous decrease in friction for getting consumers to sign up. They get tools and services. There's a really healthy quid pro quo, and both sides actually benefit. And I think that Ultraviolet should be and will be in a very similar type of situation. There is a quid pro quo. There is a trade-off that a retailer or a distributor makes in having that information more accessible. But the trade-off is actually a digital product that the consumers will value and actually pay for. And I think that's a really fair trade.
It is interesting, though. Go ahead, Mark. Yes.
Justin, just to build on that, from consumer research that we've done fairly extensively, I think we see there's some unique characteristics to actually asking a consumer to invest, to buy and own something for the long term that are a bit different than some of the other very capital-intensive things you described, like internet search or mobile OSs or something, where they could be perfectly content using one company and one company only. And what we found is just the way, I think, in a way that was so obvious we didn't think about it that much, things like DVD and Blu-ray that let consumers know that they could interchangeably use retailers and devices were actually really what they demanded for ownership of a product, which might be different than some of the kind of Google and Apple businesses that you're talking about. And in that regard, some of the analogies that I often use are outside entirety of our realm now and actually hark back in time for many of us, but the decision of banks to actually participate in ATM networks, so they say, let's let actually each of our customers use each other's banks to get their money. We compete with each other, but so why would we do that? Because we've actually concluded that it's actually good for the banking business overall. Same type of story when companies migrated from having individual charge accounts for their own charge cards. Maybe they let their consumers have. That's a great business if you can get it right. All they do is come buy from me. But people made a decision to say, well, maybe I will accept Visa or MasterCard because, yes, I'm making it a little bit easier to use everybody, but it actually rises the overall tide of what consumers are willing to do here. Some of those themes, I think, although outside of the technology business per se, are really important in this case.
Let me just, because Rudolf brings up a good point, and it's interesting because he's got that perspective from the retailer side as well, not just from the Studio Canal side. But, getting the retailers to get on board is going to be it's going to be, that's really important part of this ecosystem. As you said, it's moving from a one-time buy to more of a service type relationship. So if I could just bring in Dan from Samsung, how do you see this working out? I mean, do you hear what Rudolf is saying there? He's saying, gosh, data, how are the retailers going to get on board? I need to control this. I want to be agnostic. I mean,
I think it's important to draw a few distinctions and definitions in this, because what's happening now is, so the background here and the reason that Samsung is involved in this and interested in what Ultraviolet is doing, what the DECE is doing, is that we have a full suite now of devices that are capable of connecting to the internet. So we have smart TVs, we have tablets, we have mobile phones, and within those devices we have a software platform that allows retailers. Now, the retailer could be a kind of traditional high street retailer or an internet-based retailer to offer their services. And obviously, especially in the context of connected TVs or smart TVs, there's a huge opportunity here for people to be able to purchase movies directly through their TV set. I think that the opportunity is intuitively, it's an obvious opportunity, and it's something that we've seen very quickly take off, especially within the European marketplace. So we, at Samsung, we see this as really giving the retailers the opportunity to instill consumers with the confidence that they need in order to get used to the idea of buying media in digital format. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely the data part. I mean, the data part is it's wrapped up in the fact that you're able to offer services with a return path. So I think both on the data side and on the consumer confidence side, there's a lot to be said for the way that Ultraviolet approaches the problem.
Okay. Let me bring in just Stephen before we go into our first audience interaction. Stephen, you're at Akamai. Now, obviously, one of the things that Mark said is he said, we're trying to make this not made here, but a buy option. In other words, you're kind of easing the process because Akamai is going to deliver this stuff, and there's a way that people can get on board and make it. It won't be hugely expensive, because this is one of the things that obviously Rodolphe is concerned about. He says, how much is it going to cost me, to get involved, not just on the marketing side, but also on the delivery side. So how does Akamai see this food chain developing?
First, what a great time to be a retailer. We know that consumers want the freedom and the convenience to watch their content anywhere and any place and any time. And with what the DEC and Ultraviolet has created, you've lowered the barrier to entry. So in the past, if someone wanted to create a service like this, a platform, they would have to build it themselves. And at times, that would be insurmountable in terms of a P&L. Now, with Akamai and our partners and other service providers that are in the room, you have the opportunity as a retailer to focus more on the storefront piece, and the back-end piece. There are service providers today that can solve a lot of those problems. So what we're trying to do is make it very easy for the retailers to focus more on what they do well, being merchants, being marketers, and knowing how to communicate to their customers, and letting the technical aspects of it that are now standardized scale very quickly and help to drive margin for their businesses and their
And that makes the business model work better for them.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me just break here and see if there's some questions in the audience. We've given you, if we could bring the lights up, that would be helpful. We've given you kind of a feeling for where we are with this. Obviously, there's, it's just starting. But do you have some questions that sort of come up immediately? There's one right here. Is someone with the mics around? Sorry, hello. Yeah. Okay. Where are those girls? Yes. Who are you?
From Germany. I have a question about the cost. Who is carrying the cost, actually? If I purchase, as a consumer, a video and it's stored in a locker, and I stream this oftentimes into my device, whatever device, 12 devices, this costs a lot of streaming. And who is carrying this cost at the end? Because the margins that a content retailer will retain for himself given the large revenue shares of the US majors, studios, is not so large, the margin. So who's carrying that cost?
Good question. So who wants to tackle that?
I'll tackle it, and I think Mark can probably finish it. Like one of the things that we've been doing as we've been talking to a lot of retailers is they've been having the same challenge. How do I model or forecast my business in the future based on the fact that it is unlimited? So there's a couple things. One is, the bar's been set today that, for a UV purchase, it's 12 months of unlimited streaming and 3 downloads in that 12-month period. And what we're moving to today, once the common file format is released, is we're moving to a transactional price. So we would be able to sit down with a merchant and give them a unit price so that they can then figure out how to plan their business. So that it takes some of the risk off the table for them, and we think it helps them to plan their business in the future. So.
But let's say that this man buys Ultraviolet right, at one point, and then 13 months later, he wants to stream that same piece of content. It's outside of that 12-month window that Ultraviolet is going to pay for it, or then what happens? Who pays the streaming? Does he have to pay again?
So if I could, I want to get started here, Kate. Actually, just first of all, let me just go back to the question for one moment. Just to clarify something, the account system and the rights library that Ultraviolet operates does not store content. We actually store rights, or the equivalent of a digital proof of purchase. So any given service provider, whether a retailer or a service provider that actually wants to check on that right and then fulfill something to the consumer, would be doing so from either their own or maybe a service provider is actually storage facility and streaming facility. So that's a mechanical statement.
A Netflix or a
or a Tesco or a
Tesco.
I'm naming members of ours, not people who have committed to deploy anything yet, but a Tesco or a Comcast or a B-Sky-B or people like that.
Okay, got it.
And as Stephen mentioned, for the consumer value proposition, we actually mandated that at a minimum, included at no extra cost, there be the ability to stream for a year, for example. But with the anticipation that after that, companies are going to make choices about what to do. And I guess I'd like to say a few things. One is, there's at least some that have the belief that with streaming costs, although not immaterial, streaming costs continue to come down, that actually investing to provide streaming is actually a cost-effective way to attract and retain and keep people in an online environment where they can be merchandised and marketed to. There's a lot of upsell opportunities. There's a variety of business model hypotheses people have about why actually investing to provide streaming would be a good decision. Some of them involve actually getting ways to get consumers to pay. Some of them involve actually getting ways to have partners pay on the back end. Rodolphe, I agree with your statement before that I think there are some important things in the partnerships between content owners and retailers to kind of figure out about the way the downstream economics should work. But overall, if just for a moment, if you abstracted those two roles together, I think there's a belief by many companies that actually the benefit of actually having more consumers more of the time choose when they want to see content to buy and own it can actually profitably fund the provision of certain ongoing streaming, ongoing downloading. Also, I mentioned the bank ATM network analogy before. One important part of that is, at least speaking from experience in North America, a lot of times you have to pay $1 or $2 to get your own money out, and a lot of people do. And so there's a belief that actually there's some fee streams and some other things over time and down the road, or for one entity has sold content and another is actually helping a consumer get it. And so within the mix of all of that, people believe this is going to work. But, and I'm going back to what Rodolphe said, there's a lot to be worked out here. We're just getting started. And I think if we sat here a year from today, we'd actually have a lot more particular examples we could point to of different business models being experimented with.
And it's a shame we don't have a retailer, because obviously they would have a view. But what you've heard is two ways. One, the retailer is going to buy into the idea that they're going to pay for it because they can do something else with that consumer, sell them something else. And the second is some kind of a minimal fee, like a transaction fee. Yeah?
I'll say that I think it's important that this does not get passed on to the consumer, certainly early on in the process. We need to aggregate as many consumers into this ecosystem as possible. There's a lot of ways that value can be derived from getting them into the ecosystem, and I think that was very smart, certainly, to make sure that at least for some period of time, we're not looking for incremental dollars from the consumer. This should be an additive experience, pure and simple. And then just to underline, I think we can all do our own models, but if you look, you model the financial impact of delivering content and what that would look like on average across a customer base, and then you compare that to your standard acquisition cost from a marketing standpoint, it's a pretty favorable equation, certainly at least in my mind.
Okay. Is there another question from the floor, just while we're in this particular part of our session? No? Are you convinced? Yes, go ahead. There's one there. Can we bring her the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, what are your plans for the rest of the world? I'm from Colombia, and of course, I'm very interested in knowing what are your plans for Latin America? When are you planning to launch? Because, you know, in Latin America, we are every day more digital. 6 out of the top 10 markets on Facebook are from Latin America, so I'm really interested in knowing what are your plans for the rest of the world?
Okay, global rollout. Who wants to tackle that? Mark?
What do you guys want to do? You want me to? Okay. After this, I'm actually going to close my mouth and keep it shut for about 5 minutes, I promise. One quick point on the prior topic, and this will be less than 30 seconds, is important, and then let's address your question. We're talking about streaming in particular, where there are people we know that we need to measure business models, figure out how consumers behave. But I just want to make sure that no one misunderstands this. When a consumer buys an Ultraviolet movie or TV show, the downloaded files they may use, and also there's 2 different ways they can end up with physical media, either having bought that first that came with Ultraviolet, or buying digitally and then getting physical media. Both of those belong to them forever, for the rest of their life and beyond. They can go to any geography on Earth and use it. So just, I think we make it clear that there's a bunch of things the consumer always gets and they can use forever. The streaming they always get too, but then there's some kind of business model choices about how that goes on for them. To your question.
So you have it forever, streaming forever, globally forever, both hard disk, you know, the disk you bought, obviously, if you bought the disk, and a digital right. In a particular case, the download and the physical media, if you have those, no one can ever take those away from you. You can use them. Okay.
The streaming, by definition of what streaming is, has to be provided to you in real time when you ask for it by a service provider.
And that has different business models.
And that has some different
will
business
have implications
models
depending on who they sign up.
On the question
Colombia.
of geographies, we right now, and Justin will talk more about this in just a moment, are actually having consumer deployment occur in the US, which is very exciting. We've also begun the program in the UK by which companies can become licensed to be Ultraviolet content providers or retailers or service providers, or app and device makers, or the behind-the-scenes role, which we would call a download service provider. We've also announced that we are going to actually enable Canada very soon in that way, and then that other geographies will make announcements about in the coming months. One of the aspects of this is that we will roll out fastest to those geographies where there's indications that actually there are local content owners and local audience owners, if you will, retailers and service providers that actually kind of raise their hands and say, gee, we actually can act quickly and we want to bring this to consumers in this market. And so we'll be starting processes very early in 2012 to actually determine with and engage with people in different geographies and figure out what that cadence looks like. But the goal here is to make this like places where DVDs and Blu-rays are for sale in the world, well, then you can get Ultraviolet there too.
Okay.
I think just
yes,
one point, and I think this question is a real important one, because right now we have existing partners, existing distributors. Apple is growing every day, then opening new countries, not always in the way we would like it to be handled, because right now they open countries like Portugal, like Greece, like Nordic, just on without any local dub, sometimes no subtitles, so it's not exactly the way we would like the business to grow up. But in the meantime, they are existing and they are offering a very cool service. You buy your content, you plug your device, everything is already connected. We have new players, new partners. We are discussing right now with Google of that kind of offers with digital locker, with cloud abilities. So I think that if you are not speed enough to develop and expand your offer to the world, to Europe, to Latin America, to Asia, it will be very difficult and more difficult to compete against the existing customers.
This goes back to your other point too. It's like the big beasts in the jungle are Google and Facebook and some of these big tech companies, and they all have this kind of idea in their sites. They're doing this kind of stuff now. YouTube's doing all kinds of things. So in a way, Rodolphe is sort of saying, you know, how do we compete with them? How do we make this work? Now, I know we've got all the studios minus Disney. We didn't note that, but Disney isn't part of this either. But, you know, you've got some of the big beasts. But how do you make sure you don't get left behind with some of these big, giant companies that are out there? I don't know if you don't want to talk, do you? How about Dan or Stephen or somebody?
From our perspective, you know, sorry to say, but we are also a very big beast.
You are a big beast as well, yes.
And consumer electronics generally is I think trying to find ways to work with content providers in ways that support the content business. And I think it's important to understand some of the differences between how Apple and others work within this space. So from a Samsung perspective, this isn't about Samsung trying to become a content provider. This is about Samsung leveraging the technology, leveraging the incremental reach that it's able to provide as a function of the number of devices that it sells in order to help content providers further their business. Why do we do that? Because obviously the more we can give people compelling digital experiences, the more they like our products. Yep. So we feel, I think, fairly confident and comfortable that we will support the retailers, we will support the content providers, we will support DECE, because by doing so, it will enable our customers to enjoy the content that they want to enjoy. And you know, this is happening without these big players involved, and it will move forward without them.
We shouldn't forget that buy once, plays everywhere is a compelling consumer message.
Say that again?
Buy once, play everywhere is a compelling consumer message.
Yeah, buy once, play everywhere.
It's very straightforward. I think you know, and competition is always a good thing.
So from a content provider's point of view, one of the beauties of application-based technology is that you can build your own ecosystem. So you're not dependent upon an ecosystem of devices from a single manufacturer, but you're able, with an increasingly light touch, to be able to manage how you deploy your services across multiple different devices using applications.
Right. Stephen wants to come in, and then Justin. Yeah.
I mean, again, as I said before, I mean, what we've done on the B2B side, on the digital supply chain, is lowered the barrier to entry. And you know, if you're a retailer and you have a brand today that connects to your consumers, that's because you're a very good marketer and a merchant. And so it's the same thing. It's going to be the focus on the UI. To me, those relationships they have today with their consumers and how they communicate with their consumers is what they need to basically transfer into this storefront type, what we'll call it, commerce platform. And the ability to, you know, figure out what they want and how they want to look at it and what they want to do. Do they want to, you know, chat while they're watching movies? All these other features that I think are going to be really exciting to see in the next 12 months that are going to come from these other companies who are going to start really taking this platform and trying to figure out how to make it their own. Okay. And that's what I think will differentiate each one. Okay. From the Tesco's to the Targets to the Best Buys to everybody.
Yeah, I guess while I definitely accept that the standards, the ecosystems, the platforms from companies like Akamai create an opportunity for competition, I don't actually see Ultraviolet as being in competition with the third parties that we've been talking about. We have relationships with all of them, and we have really good and significant relationships with them. At the end of the day, the digital ownership, digital sell-through proposition is terrible, and I don't care who you are, I don't care how big you are, how much marketing you put against it, it is a de minimis, insignificant business at this moment. And so what we believe is that with Ultraviolet, this is going to raise all tides. And whether you're Google or whether you're, you know, some small retailer, there's going to be benefits that flow ultimately because of the consumer benefit that you just talked about. Those benefits will flow to big and small retailers alike.
Okay. Justin, I think it's a key point. You know, when with all of the large amounts of respect that are due to Apple and Google and some of the companies that have been named here, if you're actually focusing on what the first generation of Ultraviolet is about, which is about buying and owning movies and TV shows, just citing US numbers I know a bit better, the overall electronic sell-through market is probably, give or take, about 5% of the sell-through units in the market, more or less. And that means that for every time someone buys something electronically, 19 other people go buy it on a Blu-ray or DVD. We wish Blu-ray or DVD were overall than the net. Between them two, we're growing better than they are, obviously, but it's 19 times the size. And so if we take an entity that maybe has, you know, 60%, 2/3 even of the electronic sell-through market, but that market itself is 5% of the overall selling market, we're actually talking about a 3% market share entity. So to me, actually, we throw around words like the gorillas or like the giants, but in this realm that we're talking about,
it's tiny,
the giants are actually more people like Walmart and Best Buy and Tesco's.
We got to get those guys on
board. And other people.
Yeah.
So I just think it's an important kind of perspective on this particular market that we're talking about.
Okay. Did you have a question? Yes, let's go to him, and then we're going to go to our next bit. What's your question?
My name is Rami from Israel.
Uh-huh.
I think the technology, it's not the end of the story. This is just the start of the story.
Right.
Because all of us, we make product of content. Now we put our last dollar about to do the best content. we take $1, make the best content, take 2 cents, come to me, and try to sell this. After the revolution, we will make content with 20 cents, and all the money we have to convince the people to come to your technology and buy us. We are not anymore make content. We make advertise to content. This is a big revolution that we have to understand. We are the people.
So, who wants to tackle that? Basically saying that the content makers are in a difficult situation now because you have to think much more about marketing. And that they need things like Ultraviolet to market, so they can't spend as much money on content creation. Does anybody want to disagree with that or take that on? Preferably a studio? Rodolphe? Justin? Rodolphe?
I will say that the positive answer to this would be the more content will be available, the more accessible will be the content, the more interoperability we will deliver, the more service we will give to the customers, the more content, the more films, the more TV series we will sell. Because if it's easier to access my content, then if I can buy it at any moment, any time, if the retailers I'm in contact with are able to address any kind of needs at any moment, definitely it's a chance for us as a content owner. So definitely the positive part of Ultraviolet or all these new players on the market which bring content to us, bring value to us. So I will be definitely positive about it.
The same way the DVD as a format, right, created a sustainable model that, for our company allowed us to produce all the Harry Potter films and the Dark Knights, and this is sort of the next generation of a format that we believe will create that sustainable model and allow us to create the kind of content that we know consumers want.
Right, Stephen.
Well, I would add to that the diverse nature of the content now that you can put into the UV ecosystem. I mean, there's a lot of content providers, I think, that are probably sitting in this audience today, and all of a sudden they now have an ecosystem via their retail partners, their distributors, to all of a sudden create great genres or international catalogs that maybe before didn't have the marketplace for that. And so I would say that working together, I'm positive there will be retailers that will say, we will differentiate ourselves based on our catalog titles, whether they're international or whatever genre they want to pick. And I think that will be a differentiator, where some will just aggregate a large amount. Some might say, I'm going to be specific to international films, for example.
Right. Justin, I want to bring you in here now because I want you to talk about the push you're going to give. You've already kind of highlighted it, but I think you've got some tape to show us. So talk to us a little bit about why these particular films you've chosen and how you're going to market it, and maybe show us the tape.
Yeah, so we're excited because we're going to release the first Ultraviolet enabled physical product starting on Tuesday with Horrible Bosses. And I brought some spots to show how we're going to start. These are television ads. They'll start running in the US later this week. You'll see a Horrible Bosses spot, and I think I also included another spot that shows multiple titles that we're going to start supporting. Ultimately, this launch requires collaboration across all the studios and all of the other players around the ecosystem. We feel like we could be helpful, putting a stake in the ground, moving forward, getting product out there. Sony has announced as well. Fantastic. We believe that there will be imminent announcements from the other studios as well. This is very much a collaborative effort. Ultimately, it needs to represent the world of entertainment, not just any single studio's version. You'll see how we're starting to position Ultraviolet to the consumer. It's early. It's going to be evolutionary. We're working with Mark. We're working with other industry organizations to have a cohesive, collective message.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be extremely important.
Yeah.
We are talking. We're trying to collaborate. I wouldn't say that we have arrived at a uniform way of marketing the benefits of Ultraviolet, the brand of Ultraviolet, but it's a start. And
how much do you think you're going to spend? Can you tell us?
Well, we don't talk about the marketing budgets, but what I will say is that we're committing a significant portion of our title-based marketing to include ultraviolet messaging, and in fact, some of the spots, and you'll see a rough cut of I think a 30-second spot, is really solely an ultraviolet message.
Okay.
It includes our titles, but it's really focused on speaking to the benefits and introducing the brand. And I think through the first half of next year, there's going to be a lot of activity kind of within the home entertainment industry to do a bunch of campaigns that will really push this message forward.
I just saw a tweet. It said, Moss Cowboy says the good thing about ultraviolet is that by the end, how many titles we have by the end of the year, we got to ask that. I'm going to ask that actually next. But it says it's good that there are actually a lot of people that are behind it, he says. The big boys are behind it. All right, let's watch the spots. Can we run the spots? Thank you.
I own you, little runt. Thank you.
Now when you buy Horrible Bosses,
I want you to fire the fat people. What?
it comes with a new ultraviolet digital copy.
I'm not gonna sleep with you.
See about that? That lets you build your own movie collection in the cloud, safely and securely.
Word.
Then you can not only download, but instantly stream anywhere you are through Flixster, because your movie collection is always with you. There's new freedom with the new ultraviolet digital copy.
That's actually a good idea.
I'm a squirter, Dale.
That's crossing the line! Find it on the Horrible Bosses Blu-ray Combo Pack Tuesday.
And there's another one, yeah? One more. I can hear them. I can hear them talking.
Now, all these great movies on Blu-ray come with the new ultraviolet digital copy that lets you build your own movie collection in the cloud, safely and securely. Then, you can not only download, but instantly stream anywhere you are because your collection is always with you.
Word.
To get started, just enter the code from your Blu-ray insert.
Beautiful.
There's more freedom with ultraviolet digital copy. Look for it on these great Blu-rays coming soon. Go to Flixster and start your collection now.
Right. So,
A couple of
yeah.
comments on this. So, first of all, we are, unlike what we've done historically with digital copy, we're releasing ultraviolet copyrights for all physical products. So all Blu-rays, all DVDs.
From here on out.
From here on out.
So
we're focused on theatrical new release titles, but as Mark mentioned, One Tree Hill, I believe, will be the first episodic television series to come out with ultraviolet rights, which we think is an amazing use case. That having seasons of television available in the cloud for you to access episode by episode whenever you want it's a huge benefit.
So when do you think 50% of your catalog will be ultraviolet? I mean,
I will say that we
or
have
25%.
been doing. No, I will say that I will predict by Q3, Q4 of next year, significantly more than 50% of our catalog will be available within the UV ecosystem, and we're working on a number of different models collectively across the industry that will allow consumers to get really deep into the catalog and in fact use their physical product as a launching pad for building digital collections based on UV rights.
So Robert, you're going to catch up?
We'll catch up, yeah.
So can you say that by Q4 of next year you're going to have significantly more than 50%?
I'm not going to commit to a percentage, but a significant portion, yeah. Proportion of our catalogue, yeah.
Significant portion, yeah.
So all product, I think, is an important message. And then I'll just quickly mention, Flixster is an acquisition that we did recently, and the real reason that we did this acquisition was because we felt that particularly early on in selling the benefit of cloud ownership, of ultraviolet, having a studio agnostic brand that consumers could go to and know that they would have the best possible, ultraviolet experience, particularly early on when there aren't going to be a lot of places where that can happen, was extremely important. But that being said, this ecosystem is as much about the retailers as it is about the content providers. Where you saw Flixster in that spot, you can imagine Tesco or Walmart or anybody else.
And you'll talk to them and sell it to them as well. It's not like you're going to make it exclusive to Flickster.
Absolutely. That is not our intention at all. Our intention is, in the early days, to have a reference implementation, if you will, of Ultraviolet.
Does someone have another question? Because I have, yes, here's one here. Yep. Is there another one? Bringing the mic to this man here, yes? Tell us who you are, Bob.
Bob Jenkins, I'm here with the Video Age Dailies. Have you any thoughts on the consumer pricing? I mean, will there be one cost per movie? Will you value some movies more? And can you give us some idea of what the consumer will actually pay for this?
Let me say a short part, and then people may or may not want to say anything after that. But I got to make one thing clear based upon your question, which is that at the level of a multi-company alliance, which is really what's behind Ultraviolet, actually retail pricing is not something that we talk about at all. And so it's going to be up to individual content providers and actually their retail and distribution partners to determine that. And my expectation is we'll actually see, like everything else, experimentation. But I'll leave anything else, if anything needs to be said here, to other guys here.
Mm-hmm. So consumer pricing is up to the retailer, I guess. Another question? Yes, there's one in the middle there. If we can get the mic to this man here. Anyone else got a question?
Hi. Where does Ultraviolet fit in with subscription models?
And who are you? Sorry.
My name is Abe Naga from NBC.
Okay, and where does it fit in with what?
Subscription models.
Oh, subscription. Okay, so pay TV. How does it fit in with subscription models and?
Well, so for starters, and maybe Stephen, you might want to say something about this too, but I'm not sure the question was only about pay TV. The way I interpret it was just in general subscription models. So good question. It is one of the stated goals of the organization behind Ultraviolet to, over time, also support rentals and subscription use cases. We've used the words sell and buy and own a lot here today, but you can describe really almost everything about Ultraviolet by saying words that actually are more general, like one party can give or confer a right onto a consumer, and then this is a business and a technical and legal framework by which other parties can validate that right and then give access to the consumer. And when you say it using those types of more general words, you can see a realm of kind of innovations that could, I think, for certain types of rentals and certain types of subscriptions, make them much more valuable too. And so I think over time we'll figure out how that might expand. And I don't know, Steve, I know that you've thought a lot about service providers.
Today there's a lot of clients today that are exploring all the different business models. I mean, there's the rent-to-own model. There's a variety of models, and as Mark said, I mean, the idea in the initial phase is roll out on an EST model, and then look at the other businesses, the other types of models that can support it. And to be honest, I mean, the conversations that we're having at Akamai with customers they're all trying to figure out how to take their current business, not only obviously transition to a digital platform if they're in the physical business, but if they have a digital platform, be a VOD platform, is how can I take advantage of these new revenue opportunities based on Ultraviolet?
Yeah, one other thing I'd add, actually, I think when people say subscription, there's a natural tendency to jump in all of our minds to the love film or the Netflix style of subscription, which means that you pay one price and you have kind of unlimited access to some degree, at least, of a basket of content. Obviously, the content industry over time has had some important additional different kinds of subscription offers that say, gee, once a month or once a week or something, the provider, I'm going to give you actually something extra that you didn't have before. And there's some things that you can imagine, particularly I think with episodic television, that some of our studio partners on the panel right here now create in large quantities, that in essence could be supported today with their Ultraviolet. That could say, oh, gee, you can sign up for a plan by which every time there's another episode of whether it's One Tree Hill or someone else, a season pass. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so there's a variety of types of subscriptions. In fact, when you think about some of those today, I think season pass is squarely within what innovations might occur over the next several months. The all-you-can-eat kind of love film type of thing is, I think, we're going to have to kind of see how that develops in the future.
And to what Mark's referring to is the fact that the DEC Ultraviolet has basically set up a framework that allows all these companies to sit together and truly be innovative in how that they want to come to market. And so that's what's going on right now. Launching next week, and basically what's happening now is the dialogue is, what can we do? How can we do it where it's unique and it's differentiated?
So Rodolphe is not part of this group yet. You've heard some of his reasons for not being part of it, but you've also heard all the answers from the panel. So I want you to help Rodolphe. Who thinks Rodolphe should join Ultraviolet? Hands up. after hearing all this? Okay, good. Who thinks Rodolphe should still be a little skeptical and ask some more questions? Right. It's almost evenly split, I think. What do you think, Rodolphe? Do you think you've gotten some good feedback on that?
Tie goes to the group.
I think that I had some answer during the panel, but definitely I think that we definitely need to explore how to deal with the retailers, how to and it's critical because you have multiple retailers in Europe. They all consider that part of their ecosystem is not only content purchase, marketing, but it's also supply chain. Right. And part of them, and most of them now have a website, most of them have digital platforms, and they are considering that the way to definitely make the difference in comparison to their competitors is to bring services, to bring digital locker, to bring digital experience to their customers. So we definitely need, and the UV consortium definitely need to convince them that by joining UV, it will not affect their ability to be different from another one and to potentially gain market share.
Okay. Now listen, you've got a great opportunity, guys, because after this is over, we have a Meet the Speakers session right out there. So all these guys are going to move from here out there. So if you want to talk to them more about Ultraviolet, you can move out with them and have a chat with them at the Meet the Speakers session, which is for 30 minutes right now, right out there. But before we do that, could you please join me in thanking our wonderful panel, Rudolph Bouet, Stephen Chester, Justin Hertz, Robert Price, Daniel Saunders, and Mark Teitel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming.